we are.
Here we are.
Sunday leftovers, y'all.
The cutest pastors in town.
Yeah. You know all the pastors in town?
The craziest pastors.
The craziest? We might have a chance at winning that award.
We have a chance over there.
Yeah, that might work. So here we are at our little spot. We're wearing this spot out, aren't we? This is like our every Tuesday spot, but yeah.
Well,
Ascension.
last Sunday was a very different kind of Sunday for the church.
We weren't in the building.
Yeah.
We were gathered around serving in various places around town. Some of us were, but I did a little video sermon from the church, and we talked about Ascension Day, which doesn't actually fall on a Sunday. If you're a strict liturgical person, you would know that I borrowed the Ascension Day text and applied it to the Sunday because we shot the video on Ascension Day. Anyway, long story. Anyway, I don't think I've ever spent a lot of time with that particular bookend of the life experience of Jesus. Now, it always felt to me like this, like it was painted in the Middle Ages, like this Monty Python, God be praised moment, and he's like kind of floats, Swedish Jesus in long purple robes, just kind of floats away. I think the way we got ourselves from Easter through the Eastertide season to Ascension Day just made that not work for me. These friends of Jesus were confused and distraught, as far as I can tell, and probably not at all happy with the fact that they're going to lose him now for the second time. For the second time.
Yeah. And that is something that you pointed at the sermon. Usually we just don't consider that. They are losing their friend, their master for the second time.
I mean, the only thing worse than never actually being one of the friends of Jesus would be have to lose him and then have to lose him again, right? And so you just can imagine sort of how heavy this must have been. I think this is why the text, Luke, in the ending of his gospel, picks up on the fact that, this happened and then they just kind of went home. And in Acts, it's literally these two people dressed as angels show up and say, close your jaws and go home now because we got work to do.
Yeah.
And so, but the metaphor that really nailed it for me was something I stole from Stan. And according to Stan, I steal all my ideas from him. And he says I do it by saying, Stan said, then I said, someone said, and then I said, I said. Anyway, he claims ownership of the idea of leftovers. You and I made that idea up, didn't we? Leftovers.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
That doesn't come from Grace Point.
Yeah, but I realized during my life that sometimes I would say this is not an arrogant thing, but great minds think alike.
Think alike, yeah.
So sometimes ideas
great minds think alike, and some people have to take the credit. What the freak ever. Anyway, the bottom line is, Stan did say this, and I will credit you, Stan, for this.
Love you, Stan.
Stan talks about the Great Commission in two parts. Is he checking out?
No. Okay.
He talks about the Great Commission. I can go with that. Yeah, the Great Commission as go into all the world and baptize and make disciples on things, but also that first great word to that prototype disciple when he comes back from the dead is "Let me go, turn me loose." And I have not stopped thinking about that, Stan, since you're watching, since our retreat last week. I think it might be the most repetitive cycle in the life of a true disciple of Jesus is the ongoing, ever unfolding invitation to let him go. And I just couldn't help but see on Sunday the progression that goes from Ascension Day into Pentecost. There can be no indwelling if something isn't released. There can be no filling up of a vessel that's already full. And if we cannot figure out how to release Jesus, and we'll get practical in a second about what that might mean. If we can't turn him loose, like we say in Texas, then we're going to end up just the newest version of another zealot. Being a zealot is not being a disciple. Being a fundamentalist, nailed to whatever that last thing Jesus said, because by God, that's the best thing ever said, that's not actually the journey of a disciple.
Right.
Constantly releasing and letting Jesus go. Just the moment he shows up and you're like, oh, my soul needed this. You've got to turn it loose. And so yeah, I mean, it's been a profound year that I think we're going to wrap up in on this coming Sunday in a live service. So come back out now. And also, I don't know that we'll ever cancel church again on Fifth Sundays. It's a long story with that, but we've journeyed with that missional distinctive, and I think it's outlived its time. So we'll be in the building from now on, and we'll do whatever messaging around that we need to do. But it's a good thing. But as we end up in Pentecost, this powerful indwelling that releases us to go be witnesses cannot happen until we release Jesus. And it seems counterintuitive because we want to clinch and grab and hold tight. I think this is what formal religion is about. Institutionalized religion, and you can name the variety you want. It really is a collective way of grabbing and not letting something go. But true spirituality is release. And so I think that's, I don't know how I never saw that before, except that I needed to be here to see that. But thank you, Stan, for that. We will always give you credit for that.
I have something to say about it, but I don't know exactly how to say it in English.
Try French. How about Portuguese?
No, I can't speak French.
Say it in English, say it in English and then supplement it in Spanish, and I'll translate it back and forth.
It's like, for example, I will say this in English. Okay, what is the gospel? Usually, as a church, we reduce the gospel just talking about Jesus' birth, then he grows, he preached, he died, he rose again. Things like that. And that's the gospel.
Yeah.
When you go to the gospels, you realize that is not the gospel. Because Jesus preached the gospel. And it's impossible that he was preaching about his birth. It's impossible that he was preaching about, this is me. Hey, this is impossible that Jesus was preaching about his resurrection. Nothing happened at the moment.
Right.
So at some point, the church stopped to preach about the gospel, El predicador se transformó en el predicado.
Yeah, so the preacher transformed himself into the preached word.
Yeah, it's like we stop to preach about the gospel, we start to preach about Jesus, which is not something bad per se.
Right.
But we talk we forgot how to talk about the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
For example, we want to talk about our convictions about Jesus.
Right. And so you're right. And we're coming into this tension liturgically now in Pentecost Sunday because Pentecost Sunday is, and all my professors said the same thing in seminary. They say it's the dawning of the church age. It's the beginning of the church age.
Right.
But I don't think I see that anymore. I think Pentecost is the beginning of the absolute end of tribal religion altogether. Why? Well, because look what happens. They're gathered in a place, they don't know what to do. The wind blows, and they all start speaking languages, actual literal languages of immigrants living in Jerusalem at the time. They speak the languages of the conquerors who had exercised dominion over them for generations. Pentecost is not the beginning of the church age, it's the end of the distinction of good people, bad people, religious people, non-faith people, inside people, outside. It's the absolute final gasp of tribal categories altogether. How would you like to have been?
It's like the counter story of Babel.
It's not the counter story of Babel. Here's what I'm studying this week. Babel was that ancient, super deep ancient Babylonian city. I'm getting too much into my sermon. I'm going to shoot all my gunpowder. I can't waste all my gunpowder.
Maybe.
But it's often been preached as the opposite of Babel. Babel was the way the Hebrews understood the evolution of language. Right?
Okay.
The opposite of that would be everyone speaking one language. But that's not what happens in Pentecost.
No, it's not.
Everyone speaks the language of the indigenous, immigrant, vanquished peoples. That's a massive statement.
Yeah, when I say it's the counter story is that Bible story creates division. Pentecost creates a unified,
perhaps,
story for the people, in the language of the people.
A universal gospel that says, even in the language of your childhood and your youth, you were part of this from the very beginning. So anyway, I just feel like I'm seeing value in these high church festivals that I never saw before, and I don't know how to make sense of that. It's not that I didn't try really hard to see good things, but Pentecost for me had been co-opted by Pentecostals who just really needed a way to say we are more right than anyone else, and you're only half a believer if you don't speak in tongues. And no one ever admitted to me until seminary that they weren't just speaking unintelligible syllables. They were speaking the language of people groups. Anyway, actual language. So there's a lot going on, and I don't see this as the dawn of the church age. I see this as the end
of the tribal
approach to spirituality.
Interesting.
I want anyone to challenge me on that.
I will challenge you.
Okay, let's see what the comments say. We got three Stan comments. We kind of fished for those on the Stan.
We are doing this. We are doing this.
This is a Stan conversation.
Just for Stan.
Right.
And he said, "That's an amazing thought."
Tell me more about that, Stan. How does that resonate with you? See how fast his fingers can type. I know he can type. He can type out 1,000 words.
So next Sunday is Pentecost, right?
It is this coming Sunday. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I just gave away all my secrets. Now I got to preach something different.
Don't worry.
Different.
There will be plenty of people that will not see this.
There are so many people who don't see this that sometimes I wonder why we do this at all. Except Trey says he likes to do this more in church.
I'm doing this for me.
Good for you?
Yeah. For you, because I really enjoy to talk with you, and I think it's good to interact, and sometimes in this interaction comes beautiful ideas. I mean, I've been amazed because things that go through your mouth.
Yeah, things that come out my mouth.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's great.
Rohr said this years ago, and I can't remember if he said it in an email or live or in a book, but he said that the problem with Christianity is that we really haven't yet tried it. We name these ancient things. We name them. We baptize them in language and say what happened. We pull the event through meaning making, and next thing you know, nobody even asks the questions. What actually happened at Pentecost? What actually happened at the Ascension? The Ascension wasn't a glorious moment. It was horrifyingly traumatic. What happened in the upper room? It wasn't the beginning of the church, friends. It was the end of the church and the beginning of a real anyway. Stan wrote something. The idea of Christian preaching. Can you read it?
No, please read it.
The idea of Christ preaching the gospel and that not being in 1 Corinthians 15 Pauline model. I don't know if he's
it looks like it's a ongoing idea.
And the idea of Acts 2 not being the birth of new exclusivist group, but the very opposite of that. That's right. So that's what I'm picking up on. There's Mary. We know Mary's always going to meet up here with Stan. We got to get Mary and Stan to do their own podcast someday. We are so hungry to see the church in victory and to be able to say, now is when the church is born. My problem with that is, where was the Spirit before the church age?
Right.
We can't make sense.
It's because our evangelical background tell us, okay, God the Father is active in the Old Testament. God the Son is active during this limited time of the
go back and do your Greek work, guys. There is no sense of a God that wasn't always present to creation.
Right.
The best language the first century could come up with that was Spirit, Holy Spirit, meaning, but it was indistinguishable, at least in the book of Acts, from the same word they would have used, the Spirit of God breathing life and the breath of God. So we have to be careful to not say this is the part of God that showed up here, this part of God that showed up there. If we succeed in doing that, we're still only accounting for the God that shows up in our story. We have not yet accounted for all of the cosmos, right? And so we've got to be, we got to turn a bunch of stuff loose, y'all. We got a lot to turn loose. Okay, what else did he say here?
Did you read this one?
The idea of Acts 2 not being the birth. Okay, so in every person, the kingdom of heaven is within. That's right.
And then is within every person.
That's right. We can't, the birth of a church is just a new exclusivist club that says this is in, this is out. And I think that's what we're seeing die in the New Testament. That's what died on the side of that tiny mountain, that tiny hill they call a mountain, where Jesus floated into heaven. What died was that expectation or that hope that this would ever be the reversal of fortune and fate and putting God's people back on top. Because for God's people to be on top, if you understand God's people as being the Jews or the Hebrews, that means somebody's got to be on the bottom. And I'm much more compelled by an understanding that says what just happened was the ultimate gasp, final breath of a claim that says you must be inside this to make meaning of the world. This is what the whole New Testament is about. We just came through all these later stories of Peter and Paul in the book of Acts. It is not good news if this means someone else gets to be on top, even if they're better people.
Right.
So,
and that's why Peter interpret the event with the prophecy of Joel.
Yeah, well, he weaves some Joel and a little bit of Isaiah in there, but yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that,
because
now we've talked about, because I guess don't come to church on Sunday, it won't be a sermon.
Because the miracle, in my perspective, the miracle is not the tongues per se.
Okay.
In my perspective, the miracle is that spirit that was an exclusive patrimony of prophets, kings, and priests now is upon everyone.
That's right.
It's men, women, servants.
But is it just
everybody.
Now upon everyone?
Maybe now we are aware of that.
Okay, because Joel is not talking about
it's
Jesus.
Like we're talking about this metaphorical language. It's not like the Spirit of God came from up to down.
Right.
It's not like now it's with us and before he wasn't.
Because I can't go there
now,
anymore.
But now we are realizing, was here all the time, the entire time.
Yeah, because Joel, see, Peter tells us Joel is talking about Jesus, but Joel wasn't talking about Jesus.
No, not at all.
Joel was talking about something much more immediate to his context. Peter goes back to sort of display his pedigree to the gathered Jews from the diaspora that are now living as immigrants in Jerusalem. When claimed that you guys are drunk and tipsy, he says, hang on a second. No. There's this ancient thing we know to be part of our story. This is its fulfillment. So we have Peter telling us what Joel meant, but Joel was writing to a much, much older context.
For sure.
But the gift of all of this is holding these things in the tension we've just created and in the metaphor that we've been working with now for 7 weeks, which is we can do due diligence to these tree rings without saying we have to abolish everything, erase everything, or we have to reverse everything. We can do due diligence to all of these things and say, these were people struggling to make meaning of these things. We're still doing the same today. I can tell you, it never stops unfolding. So, all right, couple more comments from Stan, and then we'll track back and see what Mary had to say.
This is Mary. Okay.
What's Stan's final thing is within every person. Okay, that's the last thing he said. Okay, so Mary, what's Mary? Okay, go back to the first comment from Mary.
This one?
We're moving into a new ecumenical age where the old divisions are being replaced by new questions. I love that. Yep. And then she says something more. No, is that it?
She said?
We are not special, but part of the cloth through all time. For one cloth. I think that's right. That posture, Mary, what Uncle Stan would call humility, we would call open or ecumenical thought. That is the only posture that we can take with us. So we have to travel light. We have to turn Jesus loose at every turn. What I think we can hang on to is humility. And humility, even the word humility puts us in sleepy religious language like we hear, but we don't know what we mean. Here's what I mean by humility. A foundational assumption that the way we see the world is not the only legitimate way to see the world. Jesus does not belong to the people who correctly understand him. Jesus does not belong, he is not the personal property of the people who fully understand the gospel. In fact, it's beginning to tatter at the very edges of the tablecloth for me. Jesus, as a person that specifically is locatable in time and space in a single story, is no longer broad enough to account for the ways that God has been self-revealing to all people in all times. Guys, one of the 12 apostles, when filled with the Holy Spirit, speaks in Egyptian the words of the gospel. No one's out anymore. Those were the people whose austere enslavement created the identity of the Hebrews in the first place. Right. Their whole cosmovision is conceived in the desert as they're running away from how would you like to have been the one who was chosen by the Spirit of God to speak the gospel in Egyptian? There's no division left, Mary. There's no inside or outside left. There just isn't. I think that is the gospel. Announcing that news is what the gospel is all about. I think that's what Jesus was trying to do. But he wasn't the only one who did it. But he sure did it in a beautiful, pristine way that I still feel compelled by. Yeah. The moment I don't feel compelled by it, we'll go build something different. But it still moves me. It still moves me to tears. And so here's where we are. Final comment from Stan. Pushed it up there. This has been a fun conversation. And the Holy Spirit always falls from heaven. In other words, the infilling of the Holy Spirit is the dropping down into our conscious recognition. Yeah. This is the other thing, right? It comes down. In the Greek, Stan, you would know, we don't ever feed our people too much Greek because it's Greek. But there's this idea in Luke, in Acts 2, that it descends from somewhere. I don't care how far it had to come down to get to here. The only important descent is from here to here, as far as I'm concerned. This is also the longest. What do we got? 16 inches in the entire cosmos, right? I don't know if it rises, if it combusts, if it falls, I don't know what the journey is, but if it's not from here to here, it hasn't started its journey yet. And that really is the point of all of this. But the Holy Spirit that fell, that consciousness that took over that room and filled not only them but that place, we can't say that this was non-existent until that moment. This was a new tree ring. This was God speaking and compelling people to go out into all of these stories and say, you've been considered too. This is not outside your storyline, whether you be from Egypt or any one of the other many places named, and we'll hack those names out on Sunday and read them in an embarrassing way and try to figure out what they mean. Phrygia is the one that I know. Sounds cold to me, but anyway. So leftovers aren't supposed to be leaking all the content of the next sermon. We're supposed to talk about the last one, but
sometimes happen.
Yeah, and we're in this interesting season between Easter and Pentecost. So
and this is the last comment.
Mary says we need other to reveal our blind spots, and they need us. That's absolutely right. Yep. We can only each see so far, and it's not nearly far enough to fully understand God. What are we thinking? What are we thinking? And anyone who sees a tiny amount of data and thinks that extrapolates from there that they have the whole thing, look out. That's a zealot, fundamentalist. Everything they do is going to end up ending in the words ism, and it's not going to move the ball, and it won't convert our children, and it probably won't even save our own souls. The reality is, if we can't be humble enough to say, this is what I can see, what else needs to be seen, then we've not even begun spiritual work. We've only begun institutional religion. And I'm a little worn out on it. Institutional religion doesn't feel that great anymore. It feels a little empty. But the gospel still feels like something because it still sets all things free, period. No exceptions.
Right. Yeah, period.
All right, Sunday leftovers.
I think it will be a great sermon. The next Sunday,
yeah,
it will be very...
I got to go rewrite it now because I just spent all my punchlines. I just spent... What not to do in front of a microphone. Anyway.
But maybe this could create some new thoughts.
All right, then let's do this. Let's do this. Learning on the fly here. Go read Acts 2, 1 through 21.
Oh.
And you guys come on Sunday with some ideas, and then let's hash those out. Because I'm bringing some ideas, and so read ahead. Anyway.
Some leftovers.
All right, peace.
See ya.
Take care.